nature of Fire and Blood being a history book using information from conflicting sources, it was always going to be inevitable. Changes were going to have to be made when adapting it for House of the Dragon. In cases where information conflicts, the writers were going to have to pick an account to go with, or maybe even choose their own path. So, as I was watching House of the Dragon, I was fully aware of these moments. For example, the exact relationship between Criston Cole and Rhaenyra, due to conflicting accounts in Fire and Blood, means the show had to make its own creative choices, in my view, taking inspiration from multiple accounts of the events. However, despite Fire and Blood being a history book with these conflicting and uncertain narratives, there are some events that happen very publicly with numerous witnesses that become harder to dispute or play down as unreliable sources or mace the bias. Going into House of the Dragon, I always assumed the death of Laenor Velaryon was one of these more solid moments. So I was a bit surprised when the show chose its own path with Laenor faking his death. Now, there is just something I want to clear up quickly. There seems to be this narrative I've seen a lot on Twitter and a little bit on Reddit that the changes the show makes don't matter because Fire and Blood is just a biased history book written by maesters who don't really know what happened. Now, for a lot of the more minor changes from the book, I do think that's a fair position to take, but I don't think you can apply it to every change the show makes from the book. It's very disingenuous to dismiss Fire and Blood as just an unreliable history book. It is, but it also has some grounding in truth and reality. The beauty of the book is that it's up to the reader to decide what they think is the correct narrative and what sources are most valid. The reader is given some key events that are well documented and witnessed to help them form that judgment. So yes, there are a lot of cases where Fire and Blood is vague, uncertain, biased and speculation at best, but at the same time there are some key pillars within it that we can take broadly as factual. For me, the fate of Laenor Velaryon is one of those moments. In House of the Dragon, Daemon and Rhaenyra assist Laenor in faking his death, allowing him to run away and live happily with Khal Quarry. They stage the fight at high tide with no witnesses, then burn a random body, making it look like Laenor was killed by Khal. Something I must make clear here is no one actually saw the fight happen, which is what allows for the burning of the body and Khal and Laenor to escape. The lack of witness is a key part of the story here. The last anyone publicly saw of Khal and Laenor was them fighting in the Great Hall, with the only witness to that confrontation leaving to fetch guards. Therefore, no one witnessed the end of the fight, allowing the faking of Laenor's death. While in the book, what we know is Khal and Laenor got into some kind of altercation in the markets of Spicetown, where Laenor is very publicly killed. There is no doubt it is Laenor who dies. There is no possibility of a body switch like in the show. Laenor's body was not burned and is positively identified by his family. The murder was very public with multiple witnesses, resulting in a body that was clearly identifiable as Laenor Velaryon. Therefore, the changes made to Laenor's fate can be seen as quite a big departure from the source material that you cannot just put down to unreliable narrators, as many online wish to try and justify. Due to the very public nature and more clear-cut circumstances of his death, his survival in the show is very much a departure from the book no matter how you try and spin it. Now, I don't hate this change. In fact, I think it opens up a few cool possibilities if handled in the right way. But at the same time, I do understand why some fans felt concerned with such a large departure from the source material, given the impact doing so had on Game of Thrones. But for me, before I make any true judgment about any of the changes made, I want to see how they play out down the line. It's clear to me that they have kept Laenor alive for a reason, and he does still have a role to play in the story. I also think that part of it might be motivated by a need to expand and add depth to the story to help add more meat to the bones of the outline the Fire and Blood gives us. It is not so clean cut as that. Laenor being alive does have an impact on future events, and I'm interested to see how these issues will be handled in Season 2. The biggest issue people have with Laenor being alive in the show comes down to the situation with his dragon, Seasmoke. Seasmoke plays a huge role in the war, most notably the Dragon Seed storyline, specifically Addam of Hull. I won't go into the specific detail here, but the gist of it is the Blacks need more dragon riders, so they find Targaryen bastards, whom they have attempt to claim the unclaimed dragons on Dragonstone. These dragon seeds have a huge impact on the story. Seasmoke, Laenor's dragon, is one of these unclaimed dragons, being claimed by Addam of Hull. Now, in terms of the specific nature of the bond between a dragon rider and a dragon, there is still a lot we don't know, and much of what we do know more so implied. And one of these things is that dragons can only be claimed by a single rider at a time, and that the magical bond does not just vanish. It only leaves once the rider dies. Hence, you can see the issue with Laenor not being dead in the show. How does Addam claim Seasmoke if Laenor is still alive? I've seen some reasonable solutions to this, but none of them are quite perfect. You could simply have dragon lore work differently in the show, and maybe because it's been so long since Laenor left, or Laenor is so far away from Seasmoke for so long, the bond is broken and Addam can claim him. This is a simple solution, but to be honest, I don't love it, and I think it's a bit of a cop-out. It then raises other issues about why other dragon riders never claimed another dragon after their dragon died. The other simple solution I've seen put forward is that the show could invent a new dragon for Addam, or maybe he could claim one of the unclaimed wild dragons. While this does solve the Laenor issue, it does leave Seasmoke, a large and powerful dragon, sitting on the sidelines for the whole war, and I think he could also cause a few issues in the future if Seasmoke is still alive, depending on how far House of Dragon plans to go into the Hour of the Wolf. The other popular theory right now is that the Dragon Sea storyline is going to be changed, and that Laenor will return in disguise as Addam of Hull. Now, this idea has gone wild on Twitter to the point I've actually seen some fans take it as fact, even saying that Fire and Blood suggests this, which is fundamentally untrue. Personally, really don't like this idea. As for me, it doesn't really make sense whatsoever. Namely, nothing about Laenor and his relationship with, say, Rhaenyra matches any of Addam's character arc whatsoever. The whole reason Rhaenyra questions Addam's loyalty after the betrayal at Tumbleton is because he is either Corlys or Laenor's bastard. So Laenor being Addam just breaks that established plot too much. I'm not even sure without the Dragon Seeds how key events like Tumbleton would even work. Plus, on top of this, you could not hide the fact that Addam is Laenor. There are too many people within the Blacks and even the Greens to some extent that know Laenor too well. Not even to mention how would Alan of Hull, Addam's brother, factor into the picture. I've seen some suggest Alan could be Carl, but frankly none of it makes any sense whatsoever when you seriously sit down and think about it. For me, the whole concept is a bit ludicrous, and if it did happen, would be up there with some of the worst changes Game of Thrones made. And at the end of the day, I think they would have too much of an impact on the plot as a whole. The thing is, Addam is his own unique character, but what I would argue is one of the most interesting character arcs in the whole of the war. You have the mystery of his parentage. Is he Laenor's bastard son, or is he Corlys's? You have the symbolism of him claiming a very Velaryon dragon in Seasmoke, helping him be seen as a legitimate Velaryon. You had the mysterious trip to the Isle of Faces, and of his actions at Tumbleton proving his loyalty. To lose such a great character by trying to force Laenor into that story arc would be a huge loss for the show, and a disservice to Addam as a character. There is no way Laenor, as Addam, would be able to follow the same story beats. For all intents and purposes, it would not even be Addam. There was some suggestion that the Dragon Seeds could be dropped altogether, but again, given the state of play post Dance of the Dragons and how much impact they have on the story and the already established characters, I think that dropping them would be too big of a narrative shift. Plus, with the Laenor as Addam idea and the idea of cutting the Dragon Seeds, we still have the issue of what to do with Alan of Hull, who was a vital part of the story post Dance of the Dragons, and even more important part of the future of House Velaryon. While the idea of Addam is Laenor might sound good as a soundbite, when you really break it down, it just does not work on so many levels. But I do have a solution, and a way to bring Laenor back, have him make an impact on the story, while also allowing for Addam of Hull and the Dragon Seed storyline to play out as needed. I think there are 2 points in the story you could bring Laenor back without him impacting the overall plot or narrative of the story too much. Now, I must make this clear. I still believe Laenor is going to and has to die if he comes back, although it will be too much of an impact on the story. However, I think by giving his character more to do in Season 1 and any potential return, he will be given a send-off more worthy than his book counterpart. I believe he will get the honourable Dragon Rider's death he wanted. We could have Laenor take part in the Battle of Rook's Rest. The idea is somewhere across the Narrow Sea, Laenor hears about the war, feeling he needs to do his duty to his family and Rhaenyra. He returns, just as his mother, Rhaenys, leaves for the Battle of Rook's Rest. After a brief reunion with his father and Rhaenyra, he mounts Seasmoke and chases after his mother. So rather than Rook's Rest being a 2v1 between Aegon, Aemond and Rhaenys, it would now be a 2v2, with Laenor coming in halfway through to save his mother, only to be taken out during the fight, and it all being in vain with events playing out as they do in the book. While still a bit forced, I think it ties up loose ends. However, what I don't like about the idea is the fact you rob Rhaenys of her greatest moment, her last stand against Aegon and Aemond. I think there's also two ways that Laenor could be involved in the Battle of the Gullet in some way. In a similar turn of events as I suggested before, Laenor returns to help Rhaenyra and the Blacks, with him falling in the Battle of the Gullet. I think it would be quite poignant to have him try and save Jace in some way, and die in the process. It would fit well the idea of him promising Rhaenyra he would try and be a better father in Season 1. It would make the loss hit doubly as hard, but for me, it would fit better in the story if Laenor does not physically return to the point people know about it. It would cause a lot of issues with things such as Rhaenyra's marriage to Daemon and the legitimacy of Aegon and Viserys. It's implied that Laenor and Khal, when they escape Driftmark, might be returning to the Stepstones to continue their fight there. Maybe he could be involved in some way with the Triarchy's fleet attacking the fleet of ships carrying Aegon and Viserys to Pentos, where they are meant to be safely fostered. The end result of this in the book is Viserys going missing, presumed dead, and Aegon just about making it back to Dragonstone on his injured dragon. Now with Laenor perhaps actively fighting in the Stepstones, he could be involved in a sea battle between the Triarchy fleet and the Velaryon fleet. Maybe seeing the Seahorse banner will be what calls him into action. During the fighting, he will discover Aegon and Viserys. While not knowing who they are, specifically, he makes an educated guess they are Rhaenyra's children. He could then die defending them, buying Aegon time as he escapes. It would give him a much more heroic death and give him surviving Season 1 a purpose. However, something that just occurred to me as I was editing this video, a cleaner way to handle the situation that would make more sense as to why Laenor knew who Aegon and Viserys is what if Rhaenyra and Daemon had been in secret contact with Laenor this entire time, and perhaps when they're planning to send Aegon and Viserys to Essos, Laenor could be their contact who arranges it all. Laenor could have been the captain on the ship taking Aegon and Viserys. There's a much more cleaner way than just Laenor happening to be in the Stepstone. Both these ideas do have timeline issues when it comes to Seasmoke and Addam claiming him, but all I'm trying to do at this point is just think of ways Laenor could be implemented in a way that makes sense without damaging the story. There's also the idea that I don't like, which is there's also the possibility that Laenor could die off screen, with characters such as Daemon and Rhaenyra realising he's dead and Addam is able to bond with Seasmoke. Whilst this is the cleanest method of tying up the loose thread, it would be a shame and disservice to Laenor as a character to just have him die off screen. Do I think any of these ideas will play out? Probably not. But part of why I like some of these bigger changes made when adapting Fire and Blood is it gives fans, such as ourselves, a bit of an unknown when watching the show, and allows us to spend time crafting these ideas and theories about how it could play out during the long wait for Season 2. Normally I'm not a fan of changes from books. However, what I do recognise is for House of the Dragon to function as an adaptation of Fire and Blood, given the nature of the source material, some changes such as this are going to be needed to add depth to the characters the TV show needs to work, as long as they can find a way to bring these characters back around and tie them up without impacting the main plot thread. I'm interested to see how it will all play out. I should hope they've learnt their lesson from Game of Thrones, and from some of the chaos, the larger changes Game of Thrones made from the books, and they have a clear plan on where some of these storylines are going in relation to the main plot. But what I really want to know in the comments is how you think Laenor's going to return, if he's going to return at all. Is he going to be Addam of Hull? Is he going to take part in some battles? Or could he just die off screen? Or have you got your own unique idea? Let me know in the comments.